Hello and welcome into the Locked On Wolves postcast. We are live following the Wolves' Game 5 loss to the Denver Nuggets as Nikola Jokic nearly single-handedly sent the Wolves into a 3-2 hole. The full reaction is coming up next.
You are Locked On Wolves postcast, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves postcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves, joined by Jack Borman, editor-in-chief of Canis Hoopus. And Jack, we are live immediately following the Wolves' Game 5 loss. The Wolves are headed back to Minnesota down 3-2. And at halftime, this felt like a winnable game. It was, Ant had barely scored. Cat had dinged his knee up early. There was tons of foul trouble up and down the roster. Jamal Murray hadn't gotten going, and the Wolves were only down. I think they were down 6 at halftime. And it felt like the game was there for the taking. How many times this year have we seen the Wolves have a big third quarter, come back from a rough first half, and flip on a switch? And it seemed like there was a shot they could do it. There were a couple of mini runs in the second half, but then Nikola Jokic happened. And I don't know where else to start without just acknowledging just how incredible of a game Nikola Jokic had. Obviously, the newly minted 3-time MVP. Just an incredible game from Joker.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, for him to put up what he did, he put up 40 points on 15 to 22 shooting. He took just 3 3-pointers en route to scoring 40 points. He was 13 of 19 inside the arc, made 8 of his 9 free throws, and the kicker, 13 assists and 0 turnovers for Nikola Jokic. And the Wolves tried just about every single combination of defenders to put on Jokic. They had Towns guard him with Rudy Gobert sagging off Gordon. They had Reed doing the same thing with Gobert sagging off. They had Anderson doing the same thing with Towns. I mean, literally any possible combination of those 4 guys guarding Jokic with another guy spying him, and nothing worked. I mean, Nikola Jokic made so many tough shots. It feels like the last 2 games have just been complete progression to Nikola Jokic's shot making mean after games 1 and 2. Frankly, he missed a lot of shots that he normally makes, especially in that short mid-range area that he was just cash money from tonight. And then obviously just targeted Rudy Gobert over and over and over and over again. Anytime Gobert was on the floor, he forced a switch until he got Gobert on him, and feels like damn near every single time those 2 guys were matched up one-on-one. Even if Gobert played excellent defense, it did not matter. Jokic just found a way to make tough shots after tough shots. And, so much to the point where the Timberwolves in that first and third quarter and the second halves of those quarters got Naz Reid in there for Rudy Gobert to try to throw a more aggressive defensive look with burlier bodies at Jokic until, the end of the quarter, and then get Gobert back out there to start the second and fourth quarters in the non-Jokic minutes. And it was just a real shame that the Wolves weren't able to find a way to corral Jokic, because their second and third guys didn't really play all that well. Murray had 16 points on 14 shots, wasn't really that much of a factor. Michael Porter Jr. had 6 points on 2 of 10 shooting. Again, has not really been much of a factor in this series. But yeah, I mean, again, the Nuggets made 32 shots inside of 14 feet. Even when Jokic wasn't the one scoring in the paint, others, especially Aaron Gordon, did an awesome job of cutting off of him to get inside into the paint, into that little short mid-range area, and make all these little floaters and little jumpers. It just completely destroyed the Timberwolves defense. I mean, we were joking before we went live, that Jokic just kind of makes you go through all 5 stages of grief, and that, he's just an incredible player to watch. And this was arguably one of the best playoff performances he's ever had. And for a guy that's now probably a top 10 player of all time, just unbelievable to watch him go to work. And he just makes you feel helpless in a way that, I think you're so frustrated, but you're so paralyzed because there's just nothing you can do except just kind of sit back and hope. And as we all know that, hope is not a strategy. And it's just amazing how much this series has turned over the last 3 games, simply because Nikola Jokic is just doing stuff that no team in the NBA has had an answer for over the last calendar year. And it's been incredible to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he legitimately after the first two games turned it on. And the strategy that the Wolves have admittedly, like they've said this publicly, and they're not the only team to do this, but like, hey, make Joker score, right? Don't allow him to facilitate and get others involved because he's eventually going to score anyway. And he's going to get them open looks because of his gravity and then his passing wizardry, really his generational passing ability. And in this game, he did all of the above. He did it all. Like you said, 13 assists, no turnovers, and he still scored 40 points while only shooting 3 threes. And like this game is so much more about that than anything else. And of course, there's a lot of fun being had on Twitter at Rudy's expense, but Rudy's defense, other than a couple of moments, I think, especially early when Jokic was actually playing when he did so much of his damage in the third quarter, as Denver was really kind of initially pulling away, I actually thought Gobert's defense was pretty solid. It was more just like the scoop shots and the angles and the shooting his hook shots just like a millimeter higher than Rudy's reach, like all that stuff was just masterful. And he also wasn't the only guy he beat. I mean, Jokic beat Kyle Anderson off the dribble multiple times. He was beating guys with his back to the basket. He was beating guys off the dribble. He capped it off with that 3-pointer over Rudy that was well contested. This was just all about Jokic saying, okay, you're going to try and make me score. I'll score. And then I'm also going to have 13 assists and 0 turnovers for good measure. It's just an incredible all around performance. And it really is you said it. I mean, there's a helpless feeling. You could throw whatever you want at Jokic and you just have to hope, as with all generational players, all Hall of Fame players, all multi-time MVPs, you have to hope that they have an off night or at least a stretch where they're cold and you can take a lead or whatever. This is one of those games, and it was a 2-point game at the end of the first quarter, a 6-point game at halftime. And like the other point you made there was nobody else really, certainly nobody lit the world on fire for Denver. I mean, Aaron Gordon had a nice game, certainly not anywhere near where he was in game 4. Jamal Murray, he didn't really score at all until late. And I mean, Michael Porter Jr. didn't score. So the Wolves did a good job in so many other areas. It was just Jokic was simply unbelievable. And you listed off the strategies the Wolves had. I mean, we'll do a little bit more of a peek ahead to game 5, but like there aren't too many other combinations that the Wolves can try other than, trying what worked early in the series, which was be physical with Cat, try and keep him out of foul trouble. And, that's probably still your best strategy. It's just when he plays like this, no one's going to stop him.
Yeah, and if they're going to be able to force switches as easily as they have been with getting Gobert onto him, then the whole Cat Rudy strategy is kind of a moot point. And I think, I mean, you talked about it for Jokic when he was just rolling in the third quarter. I mean, at one point, the Nuggets had 10 consecutive scores, if you include free throws in the third quarter, to fuel a 21-8 run that took them from down 2. Wolves go on an 11-3 run to start the quarter. Like you were talking about, they were just a strong start to the third quarter away from kind of taking control of this game like they have so many times in this playoffs. And then Jokic just comes right back down. And it was that was at the point where you just felt completely helpless, no matter what they did defensively. It was unbelievable. And I think for Jokic to make a legitimately all-time great defense question everything that they're doing on every single possession is truly special. And I think it's a combination of that with how different the games have been officiated since game 2. That's certainly been a factor. It's certainly not the driving reason why the Wolves are losing these games, but it is undeniably at the forefront of the Timberwolves psyche on the defensive end of the floor. And we can get into that a little bit later, but it's just unbelievable to see how different the confidence level of this Timberwolves defense is now versus what it was in game 2. It just looked like the Timberwolves were flying around like chickens with their heads cut off, trying literally anything that, wasn't even in the game plan to start the game to try to slow down Jokic. And it's just, it's amazing. It honestly kind of leaves you speechless at just how much of a bind it puts your defense in when one player has enough gas in the tank to consistently do that every single possession down the floor.
And we can go, actually, let's go a little bit down that path now, because I think it's related to the I mean, it's obviously directly related to the covering Jokic and the Gobert conversation. Game 2, of course, Rudy did not play in, and I don't want to give any fodder to the idea that the Timberwolves defense is better without Rudy Gobert, because that's insane. I don't know that anybody actually thinks that. But like in terms of other than maybe the it's not subconscious because obviously they were very conscious Rudy wasn't there, but other than like whatever lift it might have given the Wolves defense because they thought, hey, we need to be X% better because Rudy's not here tonight, or X% more active, whatever. The strategy itself without having Rudy roaming wasn't all that different, except for the ball pressure it seemed, which there was ball pressure in game one, but it seemed like they ratcheted it up even more in game two. And then of course, Denver's counter to that was to have Aaron Gordon bring the ball up more often in games 3 and 4 and, save Murray, keep him off the ball until the ball got across the timeline. And then also it forces the switch, as you were talking about, where Rudy's not going to pick up Aaron Gordon full court. But what do you think, what do you think the biggest difference, other than, I mean, I guess officiating can be part of that answer, but like between game two and the level of activity of the Wolves defense and how effective it was, and a game like this one when Rudy played, and obviously no Mike Conley in this one either, but in your mind, what's the biggest difference between those two defensive performances for the Wolves?
Yeah, I think it was at its kind of peak in game 4. I think, the Wolves just didn't bring the energy that they needed to win game 3. And I don't think that you can attribute the game 3 loss to anything other than that. I think early in the game, it was pretty clear that anything you got handsy at any point, it was going to be a foul. And, it felt the Nuggets were getting a lot of touch fouls early on in the first quarter of game 3. And then from there, I think the Timberwolves just got dismayed to a point where they just did not really bring the necessary energy to compete in that game. And then in game 4, the same thing happened early in the game when the Nuggets were getting all these touch fouls and they were not getting the same whistles on the other end of the floor, especially with Jokic and screens. I mean, he was shoving guys in the back constantly and just kind of throwing defenders to the side when he was coming to screen. And those weren't getting called. And then you had the other end where Rudy was getting called for these illegal screens. And anytime the Timberwolves were simply trying to fight over screens, they was getting called for fouls. I mean, it was just all this type of stuff that wasn't getting called in games 1 and 2. And certainly that favors the Timberwolves. And I'm not saying that, it has to swing back that way. I'm just saying you got to let these guys compete. Like, I loved the fact that in this game, they let Gobert, kind of throw a little bit of an elbow to displace whoever that defender was and throw down a dunk, because Jokic is doing the same stuff on the other end of the floor constantly. Mm-hmm. It just looks a little bit more fluid, so it doesn't, look quite as physical. But I mean, for Michael Malone to then get teed up and then the Wolves to get called for charges on 3 of the next 4 possessions, and 2 of them were completely objectively terrible calls that undeniably would have been turned over or overturned if the Wolves challenged. I thought the Wolves not challenging that one on Naz Reid, that first one, Aaron Gordon was clearly sliding. It would have been an and one. It would have been Gordon's 3rd foul. I know they had to waste a challenge on another terrible call earlier in the game. But Mike Onori not challenging that call, I think, was a big turning point in this game, because Aaron Gordon not only was a really important player with the starting 5, but he's also their backup 5. And if you're playing the back half of that, second quarter without Aaron Gordon, and then, and then Karl Anthony Towns is rolling the way that he was rolling, he could have just kept attacking him in the third quarter, maybe pick up a 4th, 5, and the game could have been a whole lot different if they challenged that call. So, I think, again, it just makes the Timberwolves a little apprehensive to pressure the ball when they're just constantly concerned about how it's going to be officiated. And some of that too, the Timberwolves absolutely need to overcome that mentally, no question about it. But, I certainly understand the frustration, because, it feels like with different officiating crews, it's just a completely different game every night. And the Timberwolves defense having to adjust to that is unfortunate when you already consider that there's a puzzle that they have to solve in Nikola Jokic that seems quite literally impossible for even the best defense in the league to solve right now. And when you're already swimming upstream against that, and then you add, an even stronger current with how the game's being called, it's just really tough for this team to overcome, especially on the road when you're down Mike Conley, all those sorts of things.
I want to talk about how the Nuggets chose to defend Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns, actually, especially early in this game, but it carried over. Anthony didn't have a great game. So I want to talk about that here next. First, let's talk about our friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action when you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch your winnings roll in. Get in now on the playoff action. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball and hockey right now, both in the second round, of course. With your basketball and hockey entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. PrizePicks has something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, Jude Bellingham, all in the same entry. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today. LOCKEDONNBA is the code, LOCKEDONNBA, for your first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, so the way that the Nuggets defended the Timberwolves from the start in this game, I thought was a little more reminiscent of in some ways how Phoenix guarded Anthony Edwards in the opening series of the playoffs. They were really putting 2 on the ball almost every time Ant had the ball in his hands, regardless where he was on the floor. They were doing the same thing with Karl Anthony Towns when Cat got the ball, and Cat was the early offense for Minnesota. He ended up tweaking his knee kind of late mid first quarter. We can talk a little bit about how that may have affected him and the Wolves game plan overall. But for the most part, like the first handful of possessions of the game, the Timberwolves, I thought, were making the right decisions and reads. I thought Anthony Edwards made several quick, good passes early. There was an Alexander Walker corner 3. There was a couple buckets from Cat. There was a Jaden drive, a pump fake on a hard closeout from Denver, and he scored. I think he had a dunk or a layup or something. The decision-making right off the bat was really good for Minnesota, but it kind of eroded a little bit. I thought Ants certainly did as the game went on. It just got worse. But Denver was really aggressive and just kind of saying, hey, we're going to make somebody besides Cat and somebody besides Ant beat us in this game. And ultimately, the Wolves offense never really got on track in this one.
Yeah, I mean, it was just tough. I think the way that they were mixing up those looks of what kind of how quickly they were blitzing him and bringing 2 to him. I think sometimes it was really quick, sometimes it was gradual, sometimes they brought one guy at him just to mix things up. And I think it just kind of kept Ant on his heels the whole entire night. And then you throw in the fact that, I mean, he was very clearly gassed in this game. He played the entire first quarter. He played, all but I think like 30 seconds of the second quarter. On top of everything he gave them in game 4. I think was just a really tough combination for Ant to overcome in this game. And I think he just never really got comfortable. I think what the Suns were doing so much is they were loading up on him where they had him single covered, but there was just help always ready. And when they did bring 2 to the ball, it was much more gradual. So it gave him more time to kind of figure out what he was going to do, whether he was going to make a pass quickly, whether he was going to drag the defense further out and then make a pass to make it, a 4-on-3 with even more ground for the defense to make up. I just think that the Nuggets didn't really afford the Timberwolves that many opportunities. I think when Ant got rid of the ball, the Nuggets did an excellent job of rotating behind, something they really struggled with in the early part of the series, but is something that they've absolutely figured out here. And then, I just think other guys haven't done a good enough job of making the Nuggets pay. Jaden McDaniels, he had the first 2 possessions of this game were awesome. He had the cut from the corner, a short roll pass from Gobert for a dunk, and then the corner kick out to Cat after attacking a closeout. And then he didn't do anything meaningful offensively the rest of the game. Seriously. I mean, I didn't. He made 1 3-point shot. That was the only other thing that you could think of that he did.
He had that tough fadeaway with like 5 minutes to play, but even that possession wasn't it. It is
legitimately maddening what he gives you in short spurts and then isn't able to replicate it. And people will say, "Oh, well, he doesn't touch the ball enough." Go be an outlet for these guys. I mean, half the time he touches the ball when the ball rotates around the perimeter and gets to him in the corner. He just pump fakes, puts the ball on the deck, 1 dribble, and then just kicks it right back to the slot where it's not meaningfully moving the defense at all. I think he's shown flashes of what he can do, but I think this Timberwolves team is not going to go as far as we all hope that it can, because the ancillary players beyond Ant, Rudy, and Cat have been wildly inconsistent in this series. And you legitimately don't know what you're getting from any of the players on any given night. And it's unfortunate that, if the Nuggets are going to continue to bring 2 to the, I mean, it's the same thing with Jokic, right? If you bring 2 to the ball, you're trusting that The Nuggets, other players aren't going to beat you. And it's the same thing with Ant. And right now the Nuggets are winning, are winning those bets because, guys other than Karl Anthony Towns haven't been able to consistently beat this defense. And I mean, even Karl in the last game wasn't able to beat the defense. So, until the Wolves are able to come up with a solution to those problems, probably have to play Monte Morris more minutes than Kyle Anderson. 16 minutes tonight for slow-mo. And, I know he was only a -2 in this game, but, the offense just was god awful in those minutes, and the spacing was terrible. And it's just unfortunate that they don't really have a lot of other options because, you need slow-mo in there to guard Jokic for certain periods of time when Naz is consistently getting in foul trouble the way that he is. So, we'll see what happens, but it's tough.
Yeah, I thought the offensive, some of what you just talked about, the offensive ball movement was just really, really bad. And slow-mo was part of that. Like it weirdly, because, that's one of the functions he performs, right? Like he is kind of that. He literally played backup point guard minutes for stretches this year where he was the one facilitating the offense. And if he's not doing that, and he obviously isn't spacing the floor, then the only thing he's doing is helping defensively. And he wasn't great defensively in this game either. But again, like you said, there's no other options. There's no other. When Kat and Naz are both in foul trouble and Rudy is struggling to guard Jokic one-on-one, there aren't any other big bodies that are part of this rotation. And there also aren't any other shooters. There's not a, there's not another rotational player that's a shooter, right? Monte Morris is too small. He struggled in stints in this game. I thought, Jordan McLaughlin's not in the rotation right now. And those guys aren't catch and shoot guys. They don't have size either. They're not, like a guy like like Troy Brown Jr. was on the roster earlier this year. Not that you'd want him playing heavy rotation minutes in the playoffs, but like an option to go to with some length, some size, who the Nuggets would at least then have to respect. In fact, what Denver was doing defensively felt a little in some ways like what the Wolves were doing in games 1 and game 2, where it was, and certainly what they're trying to do now, but the effect it was having on the Wolves, where Minnesota was just frantic. I mean, I keep thinking about that possession when I think it was third quarter, kind of in the midst of this Jokic run, where slow-mo got an offensive rebound and was like 10 feet from the basket and looked at the rim and was like, nah, I'm not going to shoot this, and kicked it back out. The Wolves ended up, I think, getting a corner 3 on the possession anyway, but it was kind of like a microcosm of a Mike Conley-less Wolves offense with Kyle Anderson on the floor and not enough spacing. And, I can't remember if Ant was on the floor. I think he was, but just discombobulated. And Denver's obviously a good defensive team, but they don't have the rim protection that should be scaring you, right? They don't have and you just got to hit open shots, which, like, somewhat ironically, we talked about, I think, last week on the Minnesota basketball party, and I've talked about on Locked On Wolves, how the Wolves had, or we thought they had, the depth advantage, the role player advantage, because they had guys who knew their role, that were going to play their role to a T, like they did in the first round and in the first 2 games of this Denver series. But to your point, it's been, it's been Aaron Gordon and it's been KCP, and these guys. The other night it was Justin Holiday coming through and doing the things that the Wolves role players are simply not doing. Yeah,
no doubt about it. I mean, and you got to look at the second quarter minutes, because the second quarter minutes is when most of these guys are the guys are playing the majority of these minutes. I mean, 8 different guys played in the second quarter. They had 8 turnovers, and 7 of the 8 guys who played had at least 1 turnover in those games. Monte Morris was the only guy who didn't. And I just think that if they're going to play with this little flow offensively, and the spacing is going to continue to be this bad in the Kyle Anderson minutes. I mean, I understand why they feel they need to go to Kyle Anderson, but you are helping the Nuggets defense by putting him out there, especially with Rudy Gobert. You are giving them 2 guys that you can completely ignore and sag off of, that the Wolves just haven't found solutions to solve that. I mean, you can look at what Golden State does when you had the Looney and Draymond minutes last year, when you had Draymond just setting a ton of screens all over the place and Looney playing in the dunker spot. The Wolves haven't done a whole lot of that in these minutes. It's mostly just been a lot of just dribble handoff, driving and kicking that's not moving the defense because they're already packed in the paint. And, it's unfortunate that the Timberwolves don't have a pivot right now. And if Mike Conley's not able to play in game 6, like, it's just another floor spacing option that you don't have. You're not going to play TJ Warren. You're not going to play Jordan McLaughlin to solve that problem. So it's just unfortunate. And it's, I don't know if it's something that really makes you question like what your meaningful roster move is to address that in the offseason, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean every team wants size and shooting, right? And the Wolves have a lot of both of those things, but it's not I don't know. It's moments like this where it's not quite where it necessarily needs to be. All right, let's go ahead and talk about our friends over at FanDuel, and then I want to talk about Cat. Let's talk about the I guess looking ahead to Thursday night's Game 6. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves Postcast is brought to us by our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. The Wolves for Game 5 had opened as 5-point underdogs. I said on Locked On Wolves that felt a little high. Sure enough, it closed at 4-point underdogs. Of course, they ended up losing by more than 4 in this game. But Game 6 right now, the line has opened with Minnesota as 2.5-point favorites over Denver. Minnesota minus 2.5 on Thursday night, Game 6 at Target Center. So we'll see what that movement looks like here over the next 48 hours. Again, new customers at FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, so Karl-Anthony Towns in this game got off to a hot start, played well, which was important after a terrible shooting game and it really just a poor performance overall on Sunday in Game 4 or whatever. Yeah, I guess it was Sunday. And Cat came out, played well early, tweaked his knee. He got undercut. I forget who the defender was. KCP, I think, slipped, and then Cat slipped. Looked like kind of jammed his knee weirdly on the floor, his leg weirdly on the floor, and hobbled up and down the floor, got on the exercise bike, came back down on the floor, still didn't look comfortable and never really looked like himself the rest of the game, although he was effective offensively. And I mean, you could make the argument he was the Timberwolves' best all-around player in this game, I think. I mean, he kept them in it offensively and was a body defensively, even while hobbled, and did a more effective job than others defensively, I thought. But 23 points and 10 of 19 shooting, 2 of 5 outside the arc. Certainly some questionable decision-making, some rush shots, but that's across the board for Minnesota. He finishes with 23, 6 and 4, a couple of steals. Your thoughts on Cat's, I guess bounce back performance after Game 4?
Yeah, I just keep coming back to that third foul that he had. I mean, he's made that foul twice in every single game in this series, and it just blows my mind how you watch back this film and you still can't tell yourself, I can't do this. There's no reason why this is a good idea. And with how good Jokic is at swinging his arms and drawing fouls, like he reaches in constantly and puts himself in position to pick up all these dumb fouls that, you're just taking yourself out of the game when the team desperately needs you. And it's unfortunate that after doing so in Game 1 and Game 2, where he had really tremendous games, stayed out of foul trouble for the most part and was able to be there for his team and kind of combined the smart decision-making defensively with playing really quick and making quick decisions offensively and then getting shots to go, that he just hasn't been able to do both of those things at the same time in Games 3, 4, and 5. And the Timberwolves desperately need it because, if Anthony Edwards is going to continue to have to carry a load as heavy as he has right now, I mean, he's just going to get tired, and we saw it tonight. And again, I keep coming back to the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns continues to want to play below the arc, and it just doesn't make sense to me, man. Karl-Anthony Towns has played in 20 playoff games now. He has taken he's taken more than 5 threes twice. He had 28 points in both of those games. I just don't understand why he doesn't shoot more threes.
Talking to Charles Barkley, probably.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's, he had 23 points and 10 and 19 shooting. Again, another positive assist to turnover ratio game. I think that's honestly the most important thing that you look at when it comes to Karl. But as great as he was, I think he also has to realize at some point that they needed more of him, and they could have had more of him over the final 5:14 of the first half that he sat. And, and the Timberwolves lost those minutes, which was really unfortunate. They lost those minutes by 2. And despite how bad they were playing offensively, they had all these turnovers because the spacing was all jacked up because they had to play Slow-Mo and Rudy together, down the stretch of that second quarter. And if you would have been able to replace Slow-Mo with Karl, you probably don't turn the ball over as much. You probably score an extra 6, 8, 10 points there. And you're probably looking at a tie game or the Wolves up 2 or 3 coming into the third quarter. And then you have that run at the start of the third quarter. You could be looking at being up 10 instead of being up 2, and that's partially the difference of Karl picking up that third foul. So it's just so crucial that he stays out of foul trouble if the Wolves want to send this thing back to Denver on Saturday night.
Yeah, and it's always something, right? Like for the longest time, and even this year, it was the offensive fouls. I think last year he had, or I guess last year, the year before, he had the highest rate of offensive fouls in the league in terms of like what percentage of his fouls.
He had the most offensive fouls in the league this year, and he missed 20 games.
Yes. So that also probably, I just remember the stat from a couple years ago where it was like the percentage of his personal fouls being offensive fouls was greater than anyone else. That surely is still the case. So, it's been that, and there hasn't been a whole lot of offensive fouls. There was a dumb one against Porter Jr. in the open floor in game 4, I think it was. But for the most part, he hasn't committed that many offensive fouls. But it seems like the latest thing with him is the chest bumping on the perimeter for no reason. And then also he hasn't gotten called maybe more than once for this, but slapping at the ball on the perimeter for some reason. Like, I don't remember him doing that a lot previously. And now all of a sudden he's just like he's just asking for it. Like, I mean, they teach you that when you're a kid, like don't slap down on the ball, because even if you hit the ball, they might think it's a foul. Like, it's just not good technique, and it's it's goofy that it keeps happening.
I understand that it's an impossible task to guard Nikola Jokic, but you're going to be put in so many positions to foul, and the fact that he somehow doesn't foul in the positions that everyone else on planet Earth would foul in, and then he fouls in the positions that nobody else would foul in, is just confounding. And
that's the best way to put it.
But you know what? I mean, Karl's offensive process in this game was tremendous, and again, like, I don't know. I mean, how many points did Karl play in this game?
23.
He played
38 minutes.
38 minutes in this game. He probably could have logged 42, 43 even on that bum knee and had another 6-10 points in this game. And, those are the differences between a really good performance and a great performance. And for as good as Karl has been in these playoffs, he's been awesome. They still need more. And again, a lot of that has to do with Anthony Edwards has to find a way to be better than 18 points on 15 shots. And, for as much as we want to get on Karl, I mean, this is Anthony Edwards' team, and he's got to take the brunt of the blame in this game. I can't really sit here and blame Rudy Gobert all that much for his defense. Anthony Edwards has to be a whole lot better if the Timberwolves want to win game 6. I don't know what the points number has to be. I mean, you like that he had 9 assists in this game, but I mean, he's got to score 30, 35 plus if they want a chance to win that game, with Karl also taking another step forward, or maintaining the same level of offense while staying on the floor.
Yeah, and it does kind of feel like that's where we're at, where like if Jokic goes off, the Wolves can't do a whole lot about it. If Ant goes off, the Nuggets can't do a whole lot about it. Now, he did go off last game and the Wolves still lost, but that's because Jokic also had an incredible game and Jamal Murray had some timely makes in that game too. But yeah, I mean, I think you could say that about either team. Like, if either one of these superstars has an incredible game, then they're obviously going to have a leg up on it. And well, then the secondary stars, right? Is it Karl Anthony Towns or is it Jamal Murray who plays better? Like, you can go down a layer and then it's at the role players, but ultimately it's going to come down to, like you said, Ant's got to play better. Anything else as we look at a game 6 Thursday night? I think it's 7:30 Central tip at Target Center. Obviously the Wolves have to win to force a game 7 back in Denver, which I believe would be Sunday. Anything, in your mind to look out for? Hopefully Conley plays. It sounds like he was pretty close to a game time decision tonight. So it seems like there's a shot he'd play Thursday, but anything in your mind to look out for as we head to Thursday?
Yeah, I think the Wolves transition defense has to be a lot better in game 6. They were getting beat off of made baskets down the floor. There were plenty of times they turned the ball over. Nikola Jokic just picked it up with his palm and just chucked it down the court on a go route and threw a touchdown, over the shoulder for layups. That's something that absolutely can't happen. I mean, they've had a tough enough time guarding this team in the half court as is, and you just can't allow yourselves to get beat for that to happen 3 or 4 times in this game. I mean, that's just gifting the Nuggets 6-8 points. So that's got to be a whole lot better. And then the Timberwolves simply just have to make more threes. That they shot 6 of 13 in the first half. They were 2 of 13 in the second half. And, and they've got to make more free throws too. I mean, they can't continue to shoot free throws at a 68% clip if they want to win this game. I mean, we can sit here and belabor the referees as much as we want to, but when the Timberwolves are getting calls, they're not doing a good enough job of turning those into points. And when they are getting into the bonus, they're not doing a good enough job of then, kind of capitalizing on that and then actually getting to the free throw line in those bonus situations. So I'd like to see the Timberwolves be a lot more aggressive getting downhill. I think they spent way too much time going east to west tonight. But again, a lot of that has to do with the spacing that you have on the floor. And if Mike Conley's not able to play, it's going to be it's going to be tough for the Timberwolves to get downhill and play in the paint, just because there's going to be 3 or 4 guys in that first line of defense waiting to force guys to go east to west. And you have to give the Nuggets defense a lot of credit for the way that they've banded together after they looked dead in the water after game 2. So it's gut check time for the Timberwolves. I think they've spent way too much time just saying we're fine, it's a series, instead of finding something deep within themselves and really competing. So, we'll see.
Yeah, it turns out it's the first time they've lost 3 games in a row all year. We should point that out. And now they are on the brink, and it is literally now must-win time. I would certainly underscore real quick the 3-point volume thing. I know 3-point volume is generally down in the playoffs just because the pace slows down a little bit. But, I mean, the Wolves during the regular season, I mean, they attempted almost 33 3-pointers per game, which was, the 3-point rate was pretty middle of the pack. But, I mean, like, they've got to shoot more than I lost the number, but you had it a minute. I think they shot like 23 threes for the game. Like, that's 10 less than they shot per game in the regular season. Now, not having Mike Conley certainly plays into that, but overall for the series, each game, I'm pretty sure they've been below that season average. That's a big thing. Transition defense was really bad in this game. And, turnovers, like there were enough bad ones that's just going to feed into that even more. All right. We will have Minnesota basketball party will be the next episode on Locked On Wolves. Actually, in between there, we'll also have a Locked On Wolves episode, but Minnesota basketball party right here on Locked On Sports Minnesota on Wednesday, myself and Jack. And we'll also have Reggie Wilson from Care 11 and Ron Johnson, the Ron Johnson Show. We'll be back bright and early in just a few hours Wednesday morning right here on the Locked On Sports Minnesota channel, and then also that audio over at Locked On Wolves. My show, Daily Locked On Wolves, on the Locked On Wolves feed as well. So tons of content between now and Game 6 at Target Center Thursday night. So be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota and to Locked On Wolves, and follow Jack on Twitter as well. Jack, of course, is the editor-in-chief over at Canis Supis, so go check out everything that Canis has going on. Also, that's all we have for you today here on the Postcast. Of course, we go live after every game, so we'll be live again after Game 6 on Thursday. Be sure to subscribe and follow on all platforms. Big thank you for watching here today. Big thank you for listening. And we'll catch you next time.